For a very long time, our view of Neanderthals was quite simple. We imagined them as rugged hunters living in a cold, icy world. This picture often showed them focused on one thing: meat. We saw them as expert hunters, chasing massive animals like woolly mammoths and woolly rhinos across the frozen plains of Ice Age Europe. This idea came from the huge piles of large animal bones found at their ancient campsites. It seemed to tell a clear story of a people who were almost exclusively carnivores, surviving on the flesh of the great beasts they managed to bring down with their stone-tipped spears. This image was powerful and lasted for many decades in both science and popular culture. The evidence for their meat-eating habits was, and still is, very strong. When scientists first started to study Neanderthal remains, they found chemical signatures in their bones that pointed to a diet high in animal protein. These early studies compared Neanderthals to other known predators of the time, like cave lions and wolves. The results were surprising. The chemical markers in Neanderthal bones often showed they were eating even more meat than these top-level carnivores. This led to the conclusion that they were hypercarnivores, meaning their diet was made up of more than 70% meat. This scientific data seemed to confirm the classic image of the mammoth hunter perfectly. This simple view, however, started to feel incomplete. While the evidence for meat was undeniable, some researchers began to wonder if that was the entire story. Could a human group truly thrive on meat alone, especially lean muscle meat? Living on just protein is dangerous for humans and can lead to a serious condition known as protein poisoning. This happens when the body doesn't get enough fat or carbohydrates to process the high levels of nitrogen from protein. The old picture of the Neanderthal as a pure meat eater didn't fully account for this basic human need for a balanced source of energy. It was a clue that something was missing from our understanding. The idea of the Neanderthal as a simple, brutish carnivore also fit into a bigger, older narrative. It was a story that placed them on a lower rung of the evolutionary ladder than our own species, Homo sapiens. Portraying them as one-dimensional hunters made them seem less adaptable and less sophisticated than our ancestors. This view suggested they were specialists, locked into a single survival strategy that eventually failed them. But as new discoveries were made and new scientific methods were developed, this old simple picture began to crack, revealing a much more complex and fascinating reality about what Neanderthals really ate and how they lived their lives. So, how do we know what someone ate tens of thousands of years ago? Scientists have developed an amazing toolkit to answer this very question. One of the most important methods involves looking at the chemistry of the bones and teeth themselves. When any animal, including a Neanderthal, eats food, tiny chemical traces from that food become part of their body. Scientists can analyze elements like carbon and nitrogen preserved in ancient bone collagen. Different types of food like plants, land animals, or sea creatures leave behind unique chemical signatures. This is how we first learned that Neanderthals were top-level carnivores, placing them high up in the ancient food web. But the clues don't stop with the bones of the Neanderthals. We also learn a tremendous amount from the animal bones they left behind at their campsites. These are not just random piles, they are archives of Neanderthal meals. Archaeologists carefully examine these bones for telltale marks. Cut marks from stone tools show us where Neanderthals sliced meat from the bone. Percussion marks, which are small fracture points, reveal where they hammered bones open. This is a crucial detail, because it shows they were not just eating the muscle meat. They were deliberately breaking bones to get to the rich fatty marrow locked inside, a vital source of energy. Another incredible window into the Neanderthal diet comes from their teeth. Teeth can trap tiny food particles, which can then harden over thousands of years to form dental calculus, or plaque. By carefully scraping and analyzing this ancient plaque under a microscope, scientists can identify microscopic bits of what was eaten. They can find starch grains from different types of plants, pollen, and even chemical compounds from specific herbs. This method gives us direct physical evidence of the plant foods that pass through a Neanderthal's mouth. It is like finding the fossilized remains of their last meals, stuck to their teeth for all this time. Finally, there is the evidence left on their tools and even in their fossilized poop, known as coprolites. Stone tools used to cut plants or grind seeds can hold microscopic residues of those plants. By examining the working edges of these tools, we can find traces of starchy tubers, grains, or nuts. At a site in Spain named El Salt, scientists were lucky enough to find fossilized feces. Analyzing these coprolites provided direct proof. While they found chemical markers for meat, they also found significant evidence of plant consumption. Each of these methods provides a different piece of the puzzle, helping us build a much richer and more accurate picture of the Neanderthal menu. The new, more complete picture of the Neanderthal diet shows they were highly flexible eaters. Meat was certainly the cornerstone of their diet, but they consumed it in a very smart way. They were not just eating lean steaks. As the evidence from broken bones shows, they systematically targeted fat. After butchering an animal, they would break open the long bones to scoop out the marrow. They also likely consumed fatty organs and brains, which are packed with calories and essential nutrients. This focus on fat was critical for their survival. It provided the energy they needed to fuel their strong bodies and large brains, and it protected them from the dangers of protein poisoning. Their choice of meat was also incredibly varied, changing with the seasons and their location. In the north, they hunted the large megafauna of the Ice Age, like mammoths, woolly rhinos, and giant deer. In more temperate regions around the Mediterranean, their prey was different. They hunted smaller and faster animals like red deer, ibex, and wild boar. They didn't just hunt on land, either. At sites near the coast in places like Gibraltar, we have found evidence that they harvested mussels, seals, and other marine resources. This shows they were not just big game specialists, but opportunistic hunters and foragers who could adapt to whatever their local environment had to offer. The most surprising change in our understanding has been the discovery of just how important plants were to them. Evidence from all across Neanderthal territory shows they were regularly eating a wide variety of plant foods. At Shanidar Cave in Iraq, analysis of ancient plaque and charred food remains shows they were eating cooked grains and pulses, like wild barley and lentils. In Israel, remains suggest they gathered and ate acorns, pistachios, and various grasses. They were not just nibbling on whatever they found. The evidence suggests they were processing these foods, perhaps soaking, pounding, or grinding them to make them more digestible and nutritious. This plant use went beyond just basic food. At El Cedron Cave in Spain, the dental plaque of one Neanderthal contained chemical traces of yarrow and chamomile. These plants have no real nutritional value and taste quite bitter. However, they are both known for their medicinal properties. This individual was suffering from a painful dental abscess, and it is highly likely they were eating these plants not for food, but to soothe their pain or treat their illness. This suggests a sophisticated knowledge of their local environment and the properties of the plants within it, showing us a side of Neanderthal life that is far from the simple brute of old stories. The diverse menu of the Neanderthals tells us something fundamental about who they were. They were intelligent, adaptable, and resourceful survivors. The old image of a hunter locked into a single strategy of chasing mammoths has been replaced by a much more dynamic and realistic one. They were skilled ecologists with a deep, practical understanding of their surroundings. They knew which animals to hunt, where to find them, and how to get the most out of every single carcass. They understood that fat was just as important as meat, and they developed techniques to systematically extract it from bones. This was not simple brutish behavior, it was a calculated and necessary survival strategy. Their use of plants further highlights their intelligence and adaptability. Gathering and preparing plants requires a different set of skills and knowledge than hunting. They needed to know which plants were edible, which were poisonous, and when they were ripe for harvesting. The evidence that they cooked and ground grains and tubers shows they were using technology to unlock more calories from their food, a very human behavior. This dietary breadth meant they were not solely dependent on the success of the hunt. If a big game hunt failed, they had other options. This flexibility would have been essential for surviving in the often unpredictable climates of the Ice Age. This new understanding helps us see Neanderthals as complex and capable people, much like our own ancestors. Their diet was not a limitation, but a reflection of their success. For hundreds of thousands of years, they thrived across a vast and challenging territory, from the cold north to the warm south. They did this by developing a flexible and varied food culture, combining the high-energy returns of meat and fat with the reliable nutrition of local plants. They were not specialists on a path to extinction, but generalists who could make a home in many different types of environments, a hallmark of human success. Ultimately, studying what Neanderthals ate helps us understand their cognitive and cultural world. Their food choices were not random. They were shaped by knowledge passed down through generations, by technology, and by social cooperation. A successful mammoth hunt required a team, and the food would have been shared. The knowledge of which plants were medicinal would have been a form of cultural wisdom. By looking at something as basic as a meal, we can see the echoes of a rich and complex social life. The Neanderthal diet shows us they were not other or lesser but a different, yet equally successful version of humanity.